Hello everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Here For The Craic with me, Emma Neill. Guys, I finally got my pop star microphone. If you're watching this, you'll see I'm holding my little pop star microphone. You know what? I thought this would be amazing because I thought it'd be so fun holding it, but I think I have a bit of a problem with keeping it to my mouth, so I'm trying to make sure that I do that for your sake, for the audio. But I feel like I really talk with my hands and I forgot about that, so I like to, really do all the movements of my hands while I'm speaking, and sometimes I forget that I'm holding a mic and I'm like throwing it around the place and I'm like, Emma, no one can hear you, bitch. Hold it to your fucking mouth. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to even bother with the normal intro because I feel like I actually just can't talk about anything else right now. I think it would just feel so fake of me to sit here and talk about my week as if my whole week hasn't been like completely, what's the word? I just based around what's happened this last week. So during the week, Trump won the US presidential election and I have felt nothing but pure seething rage since. I've talked before on this podcast about how I really I'm a very emotional person. I really take on other people's emotions. I can really let things emotionally affect me, and I think it's such a good thing on one part, and it allows me to be really empathetic in certain situations. It allows me to be really passionate about certain things, and what I'm going to speak about today is something that I'm extremely passionate about. So I do think it's a great thing in that sense, but it can really be also a bit of a hindrance where it actually really affects me on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not gonna lie, Trump winning the election, it has been really affecting me on a day-to-day basis. And some of you might be sitting there thinking, but why? You don't live in America, this doesn't affect you. Why are you letting it affect you this much in your day-to-day? And I'll just say Trump winning this election is a huge lose for... Oh, you can hear the emotion in my voice already. It's a huge lose for all women across the entire world. America is such a huge, influential, developed country. They have so much pull on the whole world. The country itself is massive. The population size is massive. Their influence on every other country because, of how present they are in the media and all of that is just it's not like any other country. And so Trump winning the election for the second time, may I add, insane. It's going to have a knock-on effect on the rest of the world. It's going to validate a lot of people's opinions on women. It's going to validate other countries' governments' takes on things like abortion. I mean, already Trump has signed a international declaration that the US joins. I think it was Poland and some other countries, that they stand against abortion and it's not a human right. So already we are seeing the immediate effects of Trump becoming president, and that's getting to me, and I know it's getting to a lot of you guys as well. I think what's so scary to me is that living in Northern Ireland, it's a very backwards country. We're late to the game with absolutely everything. Don't get me wrong, I love it here. It's home and all of that. But we have a lot of work to do in this country when it comes to being more progressive. We are always 10 steps behind the rest of the UK and the Republic of Ireland. Guaranteed in absolutely everything. It'll be England, Scotland, Wales, the Republic, and then us about 10 years later, if you're lucky. So because we are so backwards, I know there are so many people sitting at home in this country nodding along, clapping along with Trump, thinking finally someone with these views getting the recognition they deserve and getting put into the position of president again. And even though it might feel like that's not the case, because, for example, for me on my Instagram, on my TikTok For You page, in my social circle, all of us are looking at Trump winning this election in complete disbelief. We're thinking, how on earth have all these people voted for this man? But the reality is that that's just your echo chamber. That's what you believe. That's what your media is feeding you. And there's a whole other side to the internet, not to just to the internet, a whole other side of people in real life as well that are in complete agreement with Trump and everything that he stands for. And on the specific case of abortion rights, it's a very new thing in Northern Ireland. Abortion only got decriminalised here in 2019. And the only reason it got decriminalised was because the UK government actually stepped in and intervened because our government refused to sit, saying that out loud, like imagine, our government refused to sit for, I think it was 3 years. Imagine not having a functioning government for 3 years. And yes, these people were getting paid their full salary the entire time. Make it make sense. Like, in what other career would that ever happen? Where you could just literally not show up to work and get paid for 3 years. It's pure insanity to me. And people still vote these people into Parliament. I'm going to get into more of that in a bit. But anyway, it just all feels so real. Like, if you're wondering why I feel so strongly about this and why it's affecting me so much, it's because it does feel so real living in Northern Ireland that is so backwards, where I know so many people are agreeing with Trump and this is validating them and this is making them think there's a chance for us to get those things back in place, especially considering how recently that ban was only lifted. And because, as I said, like, it wasn't actually our government's decision to do that. It was like an intervention that happened. So yeah, it just feels like a very scary time. Like, I feel like everything's just a bit up in the air at the moment. And even though it's not up in the air for us, like, immediately, I'm scared for the next elections. I'm scared for the next, like, what do you call those parties in England? Like, I'm scared for Reform and for the Tories' next campaigns. I'm terrified for any referendum that's going to come into play in the Republic over the course of the next 5 years. Like, I'm not going to lie, I'm fucking terrified, as we all should be, because, as I said, America has such a huge influence on the rest of the world. And the last thing I would ever want is to take steps backwards for women in that scenario. And look, I know there's so many other issues that are at play here with Trump's presidency. You know, there's so many ridiculous things that he stands for in terms of immigration. He's transphobic, he's homophobic. Like, there is so much we could sit here and talk about, and I know that, I'm very aware of that. However, today I am going to focus on women's rights and abortion because it is something I feel so strongly and passionately about. That's not to say that all of those other problems aren't just as, if not more, serious. They're also huge things that also deserve the same types of conversation. However, on today's podcast, I am going to focus on women's rights because, well, it's just very close to my heart. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the history of abortion across the UK and Ireland. So this is going to be a little bit of a history lesson for you guys. Anyone who isn't from the UK or Ireland, you might actually find this a bit interesting. I know I always find like other countries' kind of legislations and history on those things interesting because you don't hear a huge amount about it. Or maybe you are from the UK or Ireland and you just maybe don't know these things or need reminded of these things. But I thought it would just be like beneficial to go over these things so you can kind of get a grasp on how recent these things are and the differences as well across the UK and Ireland, because I think people always kind of group them as one and just assume, oh, like if it's legal in England, it's legal everywhere else. And that's actually not the case. Like, we have like separate governments across all the countries of the UK, and sometimes there are decisions made for the whole of the UK, and then there's a lot of things that aren't. So yeah, here's a little history rundown of abortion across the UK and Ireland. Well, maybe specifically Northern Ireland. Okay, so abortions have been available on the NHS in England, Scotland and Wales for more than 50 years. But up until 2018, abortion was illegal across the whole island of Ireland. So in the Republic and the North, it was like a complete ban. If you wanted to get an abortion, you either had to travel to mainland UK or you could risk doing things like ordering pills online. Basically anything you did like from the soil of Ireland, like if you stayed at home and did something, whether that be going to someone or ordering something, that was illegal. So the only way it wasn't illegal was by you traveling. And there's loads of, I feel like young people always think, oh, but isn't that illegal because you're from Ireland? No, as long as you're on the soil of somewhere where it's legal, it's fine. With restricted access where it requires people to travel, you're automatically only allowing people with certain privileges to be able to go and do said thing, you know. First of all, you have to be able to afford to travel there. Second of all, you have to be able to get the time off work. You maybe have to not be in like an abusive relationship where they keep tabs on your every move and will know if you go or won't let you go. You have to be above a certain age maybe if your parents don't want you to do it and they want to force you to have the pregnancy. There's so many factors in it. So by limiting abortion in this way where you actually have to travel across the water, you might think, oh, but then that's fine, like if you can just travel to the UK to do so. It's not fine. Not everyone is going to be able to access that. So yeah, up until 2018, abortion completely illegal across the whole of Ireland. So I do know that the NHS started allowing people from Northern Ireland to come over with expenses paid for from, I think it was 2016. So they would actually cover your flights. And if you needed to stay for a night, say, they would cover accommodation. Again, that is so great in allowing people that maybe wouldn't have been able to afford that. But you're still leaving out a huge amount of people that still like can't get the time off work, can't leave their children, can't leave their abusive relationship. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's great. The NHS started paying for that. Crazy that they would have to do that when it's literally all part of the UK. Like, you'd think they'd just be like, can we not just do this in Northern Ireland? But it's obviously deeper than that. They can't really control that. But yeah, I do know that became a thing. So then in 2018, the Republic of Ireland had a referendum. And so everyone went out and voted for whether they wanted the abortion ban to be lifted or not. And 2/3 of people who voted for the lifting of the ban. This was a huge win for the whole island of Ireland. And not that it's like, oh, okay, we don't need to do anything about it now in the north because the Republic have it. Like, not in that kind of way win, but more just in a like, okay, well, first of all, that puts pressure on our government to either have a referendum or start having these conversations, because now we are literally the only place within the UK and Ireland that is keeping this legislation in place. And secondly, if you do need to travel now, it doesn't involve going across the water. You know, it could be getting a 2-hour train, for example. Again, no, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect situation. Think about the amount of people that can't even afford to get a train, that are maybe disabled and can't access like getting to that place or whatever it might be. Like, there's still barriers to that, but I would say overall like a huge win for Ireland. So they brought that in and they allowed abortion up to 12 weeks and only up to 24 weeks in exceptional circumstances. Now, I feel like people think that 12 weeks is a great cutoff point. And see, to be honest, when I was like in 3rd year of secondary school, I probably would have also thought the same thing. You know, when you're studying like ethics, when you're doing religious studies and you study ethics and you touch on all these different topics like abortion, like assisted dying. Wait, what do you call that? Euthanasia? Assisted dying? Have I just completely made that term up? You talk about all these different things and the ethics of them, and you do your for and against arguments and all that, blah, 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 blah. And I think, you know, in my head at the time, I probably would have also thought that 12 weeks was a fair enough cutoff point. Like 3 months, that's more than enough time. But I just want to get into that timeline a little bit to explain why actually a lot of the time that is not enough time, especially for the most vulnerable people in society. So 12 weeks, you might not have a regular period, let's say. I have a lot of friends that do not by any stretch of the imagination have a regular period whatsoever. And, you know, they could go 8 weeks with no period and then they'll have a 2-week long period. They could go 4 months with no period and then it will just return to normal and they'll get a consistent one for 3 months. Like, I have a very regular period. Like, I'm like clockwork. So I'm quite lucky where I would pretty much know straight away if something was off. Not everyone else is as lucky as that. And also not even that, but even if you are regular, like, there's so much other shit going on in life that it can maybe take till like the next period till you actually realize, you know, like we're not constantly thinking, oh my God, it's been exactly 3 weeks. Like, we're all wrapped up in our own shit. We're all busy. Some people might have kids. Some people, you know, you might be on holiday and just think, oh, my body's just out of whack. Like, it's pretty normal to kind of like be able to go through like when you would have missed a period until the next one and then think, oh shit, wait, I actually didn't get my last period. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a very normal life experience. And so this combined with, you know, people having irregular periods, you might not actually clock on to the fact that you're pregnant or even like could be pregnant until you're already 2 months in. And let's say at that 2 month mark, you take a pregnancy test. Okay, it comes back positive. You ring the abortion clinic, you get booked in. They can't get you, there's a long waiting list. You can't get booked in for another 2 weeks. They tell you if you're not in any mad rush, you're okay. So you rock up to your appointment 2 weeks later and they ask you when your last period was and you tell them, right? Even if you know exactly when the point of conception was, right? If you're like, I know exactly when this happened. I know when the condom broke. I know when... Do you know what I mean? Like, you know exactly the time, place, location that this happened. Even if you know that, it does not matter because they will go from when your last period was. So you might actually be, you know, 8 weeks along, but they have to say you're 11 weeks because they have to say from when your last period was. So all of a sudden, you're now like already in their eyes 11 weeks along and you've got a week to make this decision and get booked in. And if they can get you squeezed in that time, like when you break it down like that, 12 weeks is not a huge amount of time. And so I think I just wanted to make that very clear because I think a lot of people, like I probably used to think as well, do think, oh, that's a good cutoff point, but actually 12 weeks can completely fly by, especially if you're not finding out till later on. But yeah, let's carry on with the history of abortion here. When this happened down south where the referendum happened, right, I don't know if it was at the same time or like around the same time, but anyway, it was legalized in the north that if a mother's life was at risk or there was risk of permanent damage to her mental or physical health, then it was like legalized in those cases. But there was like no guidelines to this. There was nothing put in place where it was like, okay, if this is the case, you can perform an abortion. If this is, do you know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't standardized, or not standardized is the wrong word. There was no guidelines for medical staff whatsoever. And so because it had always been illegal up until this point, and like you could literally you could get imprisoned. There were people being brought to court over this all the time. You know, mothers being brought to court because they ordered their daughters abortion pills online. People being brought to court themselves for ordering it themselves, or like roommates telling on, you know, like housemates that you're not actually friends with, like telling on the housemate when they found out that they had ordered them. So doctors did not want to get involved in this. Doctors or nurses, like any medical staff, because there was no guidelines, it was like, I don't want to be at risk of getting struck off. I don't want to be at risk of going to fucking prison. Like, there was just no like straightforward, like, if this is the case, you can have an abortion. And so no abortions were carried out. Nothing had changed whatsoever. The number of abortions that were actually carried out, like by the book, not by the book, but, you know, legally, I guess, were in the single figures per year. That's how low it was. That's how little people were refusing to do so. And also because of attitudes and beliefs as well of so many people in Northern Ireland. Like, lots of doctors, I guess, because it was illegal for so long, they would see that as a conflict of interest of their own personal beliefs. So they wouldn't want to carry these things out, which is a whole other thing in itself. But yeah, it was actually so fucking terrible. Like, proposals of allowing abortion even for like fatal fetal abnormality, in the cases of rape, in the cases of incest, were rejected in Northern Ireland. Like, what? You could be going to prison for longer than your rapist because you ordered abortion pills. Just let that sink in for a second. You could be in prison up to life while your rapist gets out in 3 years. That leaves me speechless. Like, no words. So then for 3 years, Northern Ireland had no proper functioning government. The Assembly did not meet. Basically, there was a disagreement when it came to stuff about Brexit. Brexit was very confusing. It was a very confusing time for Northern Ireland. It still is. A lot of people don't understand why, that don't live here. And look, that's a whole other topic that I'm not going to get into, but basically there was just a lot of disagreements around Brexit for Northern Ireland and what that meant for us. And our government refused to come to an agreement. And as a result of this refusing to come to an agreement, they actually just point blank refused to sit, which is crazy. Like, okay, have this disagreement, but don't not show up to work. Don't not come and discuss other things. I get that this is like a big thing and the two parties are going to have differing opinions on this, but like your country needs you to go and just discuss absolutely everything else. Like, what about all of the other things? Anyway, it turned out to actually be a little bit of a blessing in disguise in some senses, because 2 years into that, the UK government intervened and they completely decriminalised abortion across Northern Ireland. That actually meant that Northern Ireland now has the most progressive laws for abortion across the whole of the UK and Ireland. Because, and I didn't know this until I was doing my research for this podcast, even though across England, Scotland, Wales and the Republic of Ireland, it's legalised in certain circumstances and scenarios. Like, it has to be all through certain steps, you know? You have to go through the NHS, for example, and or NHS funded clinics and things like that. However, if you don't go through those ways, it's still a criminal offence. So you can still go to prison if you don't go through those ways, right? Whereas in Northern Ireland now, it is completely decriminalised. It doesn't matter what way you go about it. I mean, obviously it's way more safe to go, like, you know, the proper way and go through these clinics or go through the NHS, through the hospitals. And it also probably doesn't cost you ever, I don't think. Yeah, unless you go private, then it would cost you. But anyway, even if you were to illegally order them from somewhere or whatever you might do, it's still fully decriminalised. You will never be able to be brought to court over an abortion, whereas that's actually not the case across England, Scotland and Wales, which I did not know. So by pure fucking luck, because unheard of for Northern Ireland to be more progressive in absolutely anything than the rest of the UK and Ireland, we now actually have the most progressive laws compared to the rest of them when it comes to abortion, and abortion only, not anything else. Well, I don't know. I don't think there's anything else that's the case. So that was in 2019. And as I said, up until this point, you could get life imprisonment for abortion, and rapists could get a mere 3 to 6 years. I can't. And at this time, a case was actually dropped on a woman buying abortion pills for her teenage daughter. So like, it was, you know, literally up until this point, people were legitimately going to prison. Like, it wasn't even oh, you could go to prison. No, they were. Like, there was very much people in court over this matter that then just got dropped. So the new legislation allows abortion in all circumstances for the first 12 weeks. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's because of physical health, mental health, because you quite simply don't want to have a baby, financial circumstances. It doesn't matter. If you don't want to have the pregnancy, you do not have to follow through with it within the first 12 weeks, and up to 24 weeks when there is no risk to physical or mental health of the pregnant person. So actually, again, a lot more easier to get it up to the 24-week mark than the likes of the Republic of Ireland. And beyond that, it's very limited circumstances. However, the setup of abortion services across the whole of Northern Ireland has been extremely slow and very underfunded. So although this is the new legislation, the practicalities of it aren't what you would think. It's not as easy as it should be, basically. I know that in Belfast, being the capital city, I know that it's pretty easy here. It's pretty straightforward. There are really amazing NHS funded clinics that have, you know, a great team and great support no matter what your decision may be. Whereas I know outside of Belfast that is not the case, and actually it's been uncovered that there's been a lot of fake clinics set up. So these are clinics that essentially pretend to be like a family planning clinic, or like a, what do you call them? Well, they'll never actually say abortion services on them, but they'll kind of allude to that. So they'll say like, you know, we can discuss all of your options if you have an unwanted pregnancy, and we'll give you unbiased information and that type of thing. But they're actually not anything to do with the NHS. They're not NHS funded. They're not regulated by the NHS. Like, I'll have absolutely nothing to do with the government or with the NHS. They're usually charity led. They'll either be like a church charity, like a religious kind of charity. They'll be like an anti-abortion charity, and they keep that very hidden. They don't say that it's run by those people. So anyway, a lot of people will like, you know, immediately go on Google search unwanted pregnancy, what are my options, and these things will come up because they've got their SEO done so that if you type in like abortion, that theirs comes up. So people will go to these people, sit down and try and talk to them, and they will give them false medical advice. They will try and persuade them to keep the baby. They will use like manipulative tactics. They will show them fake pictures of what the baby looks like at this stage in their pregnancy. They'll even do unnecessary scans to try and make you more like attached to the fetus so that you're less likely to go ahead with an abortion. And yeah, it's just like extremely misleading, completely taking advantage of women in their most vulnerable state. Like how these people go to bed at night thinking I've done a good job at the end of the day and not feeling absolutely horrified in themselves is fucking insane to me, because how dare you? Like, honestly, how dare you? And I'm going to get more into this later on in the episode. I'm going to talk a lot about this, but BBC Panorama did an investigation into these clinics across the whole of the UK, and a lot of them are in Northern Ireland. And I did see some footage for them. You know what? Thinking about it now, I don't know, did they make this into a whole documentary and that's how I found out about it, was from like clips on TikTok, or I don't know. Maybe it is a full documentary. I'll look into it, and if it is a full documentary, I'll link it in the episode description. But anyway, the things that these people were saying to the women was like mind-boggling. Like, it would make you want to go in there like undercover and fucking, I don't know what, do. No, I'm joking. It's because I throw anything and everything at their faces, but no, we don't act in violence. Yeah, we're going to get more into that BBC investigation, but for now, I will just say it's not as straightforward as it should be, considering the new legislation. In Belfast it is, but again, even Belfast has those fake clinics, so like if you fall into that trap and go to the non-NHS funded ones by accident, I know Stanton Healthcare is one of the fake ones. Stay the fuck away from it. Don't go anywhere near anything under the name of Stanton Healthcare, okay? So yeah, if you like by chance happen to fall into that one instead of the correct one, then like it's so horrible. It's honestly like women come away completely traumatized from those interactions within those clinics. And I know that it's very common outside of Belfast, because a lot of these kind of smaller towns and more religious communities outside of Belfast, you know, the smaller cities, the smaller towns, the more kind of, I guess, yeah, more backwards. Usually places outside of the city are a bit more backwards, and because those people living in those places don't believe maybe in abortion, then they're way less likely to have people working in like NHS funded clinics, and they're way more likely to have people working in the fake ones. So yeah, unfortunately, although you would like to think that all is good, that's actually not the case. And it does still require people travelling to, well, usually Belfast. So yeah, it was never decriminalised in England, Scotland and Wales, and that act still stands in place from 1861. But there has been talks of decriminalising it now that Northern Ireland has done the same, and people are currently across England, Scotland and Wales, people are currently on trial for managing their own abortions. Yeah, let's get into this BBC Panorama investigation that took place. So lots of women were coming away from these clinics being like completely traumatized, like in floods of tears, can't believe they're being treated like this, has like fully sent them into despair. You know, they thought they went in with like quite a clear vision of what they wanted to do, but maybe were like a bit on the fence, were feeling quite shameful about the whole thing, you know, in very, very vulnerable positions. And these people in these clinics just completely taking advantage of that. And yeah, just really manipulating them in those scenarios. So the Counselors, as I said, would make them go for unnecessary scans. They were reported to get more like aggressive and abusive when it became clear that patients definitely did want an abortion. You know, if they came in very headstrong and it was very clear after them trying these multiple tactics, I guess you could call them, to persuade them, if it was very clear that they weren't gonna change in that, then it was reported that they did get very like abusive and aggressive, and yeah, just horrible. So BBC Panorama did an investigation and identified 57 crisis pregnancy advice centres advertising online. They contacted all 57, pretending to be women wanting advice about their options, including abortion. So they always made sure to mention that, because obviously you would like to think that a clinic that doesn't support abortion or doesn't provide that option, you would like to think that if you're ringing saying that is something that you would like, then you would like to think on the phone that they would say, oh, that's not something we offer, but we can give you advice about everything else. But no, of course they're not going to say that, because they want to let on that is an option. So you come in and then they persuade you otherwise. So of these 57 ones that they reached out to, it turned out to be that 34 directed them to the NHS website or a regulated abortion provider. 21 centres gave misleading medical information and or unethical advice about abortion. 7 centres said having a termination could lead to post-abortion syndrome. That's not a thing. A mental health condition likened to post-traumatic stress disorder, which again, not recognised by the NHS, very much not a thing. And 8 centres linked abortion to infertility and problems carrying future pregnancies to term. And this one's the craziest, actually. 5 centres linked abortion to an increased risk of breast cancer. Like, how are these people sleeping at night? How are you out there giving women false medical advice? And how do you think that's okay? How do you, like, if you truly believe in your mind that abortion shouldn't, like, that you don't agree with it, why are you having to give false claims just to persuade people not? Like, surely if you're having to do that, that makes you think, actually, you know what? If there isn't so much risk, like, maybe these women should be allowed the choice. Does that ever cross your mind? And like, they definitely go home and think, oh my God, I saved so many unborn babies from being aborted today. And it's like, no, you actually just traumatized a shit ton of women, all in the name of your own personal gain and this agenda that just suits you and absolutely no one else. And you're just taking the choice away from women and traumatizing them. In what world is that okay? And it's so crazy, because you'd like to think upon this discovery that the government could step in and shut these places down, but it's so much more complicated than that, because they're charity led usually, like they're usually volunteers. And so because it's not a business, because no one's profiting from these things, because there's not necessarily, like, you know, people making money off of false medical claims or false information, then it's actually way harder than you would think for them to do much about this. Because even now, after the investigation and it's been reported, it's more on, I can't remember the name of it, but like some charity kind of board, not board, but like each country basically will have like a charity, sorry, the word's really not coming to my head right now, but they'll be able to look into it. But even then, like, they really won't be able to do much about it. Like, if those people want to carry on doing these things and having these talks with women, they're gonna carry on doing it, and that's a scary thing. So yeah, I think we need to raise so much more awareness about these places and really try and prevent people from going to them. So during telephone and in-person consultations, Panorama were told that women who have an abortion suffer emotional disturbances because they know they have been a mother but they have no baby. And they would suffer consequences after having an abortion and walk out of here a different person. The whole point of these clinics is supposed to be to give you unbiased information. You know, it's supposed to be, here are your options. Whatever you decide to do, we support you in that. And as long as you are making this decision for yourself, you should not be trying to persuade anyone to choose anything out of all of those options. You know, you're literally a person working there to present the options, present the information, and that be it. And then, you know, if the person has any questions, talk to them about it, give them accurate information on these things. So you should never be made to feel guilty or shameful or like you should do a certain thing. They also said in these consultations that women who move on quickly after an abortion have done so because they have blocked out of their minds that it was a real baby, and that it would be amazing to have your own child, and asked how it would feel to actually hold your own baby. Again, just completely manipulating women when they're so fragile and they're already overthinking everything, and you're making them now think in this way. Insane. One centre actually said that women could experience hallucinations involving babies crying and have nightmares of something happening to a child after an abortion. So I did already mention Stanton Healthcare in Belfast, and this was one of the clinics that was investigated, and they found in Stanton Healthcare that they were doing the scans on literally absolutely everyone, and that is considered to be a very manipulative tactic because it is just completely unnecessary. There are some cases where a scan is necessary, but 9 times out of 10 that's actually not the case. If you've got a positive pregnancy test, that's enough. So a woman, Claire, who was 10 weeks into a planned pregnancy, agreed to secretly film for Panorama and basically go in undercover for Panorama into Stanton Healthcare. And during the consultation, she was told by an advisor about post-abortive syndrome, described as severe anxiety that erodes your mental health for 6 months to 6 years. The advisor also outlined what the centre described as the side effects of the abortion pill, saying it contained a whopping dose of female hormone. They said within 48 hours, your baby will die of hunger and thirst, and it will be starved to death. Sorry, all of these quotes, they actually just fully leave me speechless. I don't know what more I can say. Claire was also told that the centre provided aftercare and financial help to women who went ahead with their pregnancies. Not the case. As she left, she was given leaflets containing graphic images of aborted fetuses and information which suggested she could get breast cancer if she had a termination. And these people think they're doing the Lord's work. Oh my God. The rage that fills me with is on another level. And for an absolute fact that clinic is doing sweet fuck all once that baby is born. They're not putting their hands in their pockets to give any form of support whatsoever, whether that be emotional support with the mum, any financial support with the baby, nothing. There's nothing coming from that. It's just complete lies. And anyone participating in these clinics that actually is a medical professional, whether that be a doctor or a nurse, how dare you use your medical license to participate in such things? You honestly should be struck off immediately. There are so many amazing doctors and nurses in this world and that work for the NHS that do such an amazing job, and yet there are some out there taking advantage of women in this way, and that is so extremely fucked up beyond belief. You genuinely deserve to be struck off and never be allowed to work again. How dare you use your degree, your license, your respectable title as whatever it is that you are, to sit there and tell women false medical claims, to traumatize them, to scare them, to make them question themselves, make them question their own morals and ethics. That is not your job to do that. And look, actually a lot of these clinics, they're not full of medical professionals. A lot of them are, as I said, volunteers from, anti-abortion charities, from churches, things like that. Yeah, they're not medical professionals, but also shame on them. But I did see, when I saw the clips of this BBC Panorama investigation, I did see nurses taking part in this. So, and in the article as well, I did read about doctors who have their own clinics of that, which is insane. And I don't know how no one's done anything about that. I guess because they're not giving false medical claims under the NHS, because if you were doing that but it was on behalf of the NHS and you're giving false advice, then obviously they have the grounds to penalise you for it, or get rid of you or whatever. But I think because it's outside of that, maybe they don't have control, they don't have proof. I mean, they do have proof now with the investigation, but that's only for a small number of people. Then there's not a huge amount they can do about it. So yeah, it's just all really fucked up, and my heart goes out to women that do end up in those clinics when they are feeling so emotional, so all over the place, so frantic, stressed, not knowing what to do, maybe have literally been able to escape the house for an hour from an abusive relationship, and they want to quickly get this abortion, like sort it out, be able to get home and never speak of it again, and they're fully leaving like traumatized and thinking that this isn't an option for them. Like, oh, it makes me want to cry. And I like, maybe there's a resource. I don't know if anyone knows of a resource online. This would be amazing, actually, if there was a resource online where you could see what was the actual like government funded and NHS funded abortion clinics, so that you knew exactly where to go and what to avoid. That would be incredible. I'll look into that and see, because I'm sure there is like a list on the NHS website or something like that. But yeah, if I find that, I'll leave it in the description. It's just so crazy because, like, okay, yes, if I accidentally went to one of those places, which by the way is so easy to do so, because when you look up these places on Google, just like a load of different things come up and you're just kind of clicking every link and seeing, you know, where you can go and what you can do and what your options are and where will take you the quickest and blah blah blah. So it would be very easy to just accidentally show up at one of them thinking like it wasn't the case. And in that scenario, if I was to show up to one of those clinics, for example, and someone started speaking at me like that, I honestly would be like, how fucking dare you? Like, do not speak to me like that. Do not give me false medical advice like that. You're insane. However, take me, let's say when I was 14, that wouldn't have been the case. I'd have freaked out. I'd have thought, oh my God, I'm going to get breast cancer. Oh my God, I'm going to have PTSD. Oh my God, I'm going to have post-abortion syndrome or whatever the fuck it is that they made up. Like, I'd be spiraling. I'd be thinking all of these things. I'd be thinking I'm going to have mental health problems for the next 6 years. I'm going to really struggle with this. Like, this is not an option for me. Maybe this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And like, you know, I know that would be the case when I was 14 years old. And just like in the same way, someone that maybe, you know, wasn't so sure of themselves or even in their decision and really didn't know, like was very misinformed and really didn't know what their options were and went to one of these places, or again, as I said, was in an abusive relationship and like was already like really on edge and really emotional about the whole thing. And then you have like these clinics talking to women in this way. And so like, it's all good and well sitting here saying, oh, but if I showed up there, like I'd just tell them to fuck off. But that's not the case for everyone. Again, you're just playing on women's vulnerabilities and women being literally in their most like frantic, stressed out, vulnerable state. And all I can say is that you are vile if you're giving out false medical advice like that. That is disgusting and for your own agenda. And then what? Whoop-de-doo, like you've forced another woman into carrying a pregnancy that they didn't want? Are you going home and celebrating traumatizing women on a day-to-day basis? It's vile. It's literally vile. I have nothing else to say about those people. You know, be anti-abortion for yourself all you want. If you yourself would never have an abortion and those are your beliefs and your own morals, that is so fine. No one's forcing you to ever get an abortion. Like, newsflash, you don't have to get one. It's actually that simple. You go ahead and live by those beliefs. No one is stopping you. Carry every pregnancy that you have, you know. Carry as many fucking babies as you want. No one is stopping you from living that life. But how dare you have a say over other women's choice in the matter? Because not everyone believes in that. Not everyone holds the same religious beliefs as you. Not everyone believes that life starts from conception. Not everyone believes that, like, you know, that's just the cards that you're dealt with, because actually no, you can't change that. And so how fucking dare you think that you should have the right to say what another woman does with her body? That is not your choice to make. You're not the person that will have to go through with that pregnancy. You're not the person that will have to raise that child. You are not the person that is in those circumstances, because every single pregnancy is under completely different circumstances. There is not one pregnancy in this world that is exactly the same. Not one. Whether that be, you know, your financial status, your living situation, your relationship status, your mental health, your physical health at the time. Like, there are so many factors that come into it. There are so many reasons why women would not want to carry through with a pregnancy. And so how dare you treat it like it's a black and white thing that you can just put a blanket thing over and say that no women should ever be allowed the choice in that? That is insane to me. Like, go ahead, believe your beliefs, hold your own, like, religious beliefs and your own morals, and you yourself never get an abortion. Don't you dare say that another woman can't make that choice for herself. You're giving more rights to a bundle of cells in her womb than you are to a living, breathing woman living on this planet. Guys, I was meant to get into a lot more on this topic. I was going to talk a lot more about Trump winning the election, a lot more about pro-lifers. I was going to get into the control of women, the 4B movement, shifting gender roles. There was so much research I did on this topic and so much I wanted to talk about. But we are already at the hour mark here, so I'm going to leave it there I feel like this is a good place to leave it for this week's episode. I guess we focused a lot more on the history of abortion across the UK and Ireland, and then, the what's in place now and how the system kind of works now. So we will leave it for here now, and I'll maybe get into all of those topics on next week's episode. But as always, thank you so much for listening or watching. Remember to subscribe, follow the podcast, rate and review, thumbs up if you're on YouTube, leave a little comment. I love you guys so much. I will speak to you in next week's episode. Bye.